Recently, I've been endeavouring to break up with emulators and play as much as possible on real hardware. This isn't totally for dirty pirate reasons either. I regularly cover topics like prototypes and unreleased games, on my unreleased or unobtainable and Sunday quickie videos. So it would be nice to show the gameplay as authentically as possible. While this is fairly easy to achieve on disc-based consoles, I've started to collect flash carts to cover everything else. These will likely be from China on a budget, and I'll determine if they suck. Starting with the Game Boy Advance, today we're checking out the Supercard Mini SD. I purchased this on eBay and it cost just over $25 Australian, including shipping. It arrived in a box that was quite squished and was also missing the manual. Luckily, the eBay listing included instructions, and I also found some decent resources around the web. I'll link these in the description. It only supports a micro SD card of up to 2 GB, which needs to be formatted to FAT. This was not included with the particular flash card I purchased. Additionally, high-speed cards are not recommended, so you may need to seek one out if you don't already have one hanging out in a drawer. It includes support for save states, cheats, and emulation of the NES and Game Boy Color. Physically, the cartridge is made out of transparent purple plastic, which is a timeless look, and includes this awesome low-res label of Boba Fett because why not? Be careful plugging in the SD card, however. There is enough of a gap between the slot and the casing for it to fall through. Whoops. So, who manufactured this? Well, according to the box, we have the Supercard team to thank. There is a website, but while it was initially up when I started research for this video, it was offline by scripting time, so I had to use the Wayback Machine to view it. Digging through the website, a lot of the documentation dates back to 2009. They also appear to sell many variants of this card that use different memory cards or include features like Rumble. The eBay listing claims it doesn't work with the SP, but I beg to differ. I used one for most of my testing. I also successfully tested it on a DS Lite. Presumably, it works on the original GBA, but mine is currently not functional and will need to be repaired in a future video. Adding ROMs is simple, but not as straightforward as copying them right to the memory card. You'll need a software package called Supercard. The newest version is 2.71, and this will likely remain the newest since it was released way back in 2010. This is easy to find on Google. The eBay listing claims you need to run it in Windows XP compatibility mode, but again, I beg to differ. It ran with no issues on my Windows 10 machine. Check out the compatibility settings if you do run into problems, however, and it also probably doesn't hurt to run the software as an administrator. Simply add the ROM to the Game List tab and select the output folder in the Options tab. I usually output directly to the memory card. When ready, push the output button on the Game List tab. You can do several at once if you wish. You can also organize the ROMs on the memory card by folder if you're organized. This is handy since 3 files per game will be outputted. There's the original GBA file, a SAV file, and lastly a SCI file. There's an extra step for NES and GBC emulation, however. Copy the ROM where you're storing it, rename the extension from either .NES or .GBC to .GBA. Output the renamed ROMs in Supercard using the same process, which will generate those same 3 files. Keep the .SAV and SCI files, but delete the GBA file, replacing it with the original, which will be .NES or .GBC. Theoretically, these should run through the flashcard with no extra steps, but I ran into issues with the NES ROMs. You can bring up the emulation settings once the game is playing by pressing the L and R buttons together. This shows what the emulator is and its version. For NES, the flashcard is using Pocket NES 9.97. This released all the way back in 2005. The latest version is from 2020. For Game Boy Color, it's using Goomba Color Alpha 6. As far as I can tell, that version was released in 2006, while the newest version dates to 2019. Needless to say, they're hilariously out of date. Out of the handful of NES ROMs I tried, only Super Mario Bros. Seemed to work. I tried a few Contra and Castlevania ROMs, but loaded a glitched screen instead. I tried a few different settings in the emulation menu, but had no luck. This isn't a huge bother for me at least, since I did not specifically buy this to emulate NES games on my GBA. It might be a bummer for others, however. On the other hand, I tested several GBC games and they seem to work fine. I have also purchased a dedicated GBC flashcard, however, which you'll see in a future video. So again, I wouldn't be too fussed anyway. As for GBA games, the cartridge run just about everything I threw at it. The only ROM that outright didn't work was the Game Boy Advance video version of Shrek. This would have been a great novelty, but apparently the 64MB versions of GBA video are tricky to run on emulators. I'm guessing there is some extra hardware in those cartridges since they didn't work here either. But fortunately, if you're into that sort of thing, the 32MB versions run just fine. Man, if I knew I could have watched Pokemon or SpongeBob SquarePants on my Game Boy growing up, I'm sure I would be a very different person today. I also tested a few games that are notoriously difficult to emulate, like Digimon Racing and Iridian 3D. As far as I can tell, the flashcart played these fine, although I did run into some slowdown issues with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, although bizarrely, only in the career mode. The cartridge does include a battery, so there is saving, but I found the process hit and miss. The normal saving process for a game works fine. However, you need to hold down the L, R, A and select buttons and use the normal save button or it won't work. This becomes a pain. Otherwise, you can try a save state, here referred to as a real-time save, by holding down the L, R, B and select buttons. This is where I ran into issues though. During my testing, I encountered glitches when reloading game saves. Here is where everything fell apart for my specific use case however, its compatibility with the Game Boy player on the GameCube. As mentioned, I purchased this to authentically record gameplay footage of games I don't or can't physically own. Plugging the cartridge into my GBA player and the menu does boot, but no games will show. Sometimes I can't even tab between the menus. Researching the issue, and I can't find anyone else with the issue because I see absolutely no mention of the GBA player in any video I watched or article I read about this flashcart. Everyone else showed it working on handhelds only. I tried several different SD cards too. They were all low speed 2GB from a variety of brands, including Samsung and SanDisk, but no dice. So in conclusion, the Supercard Mini SD seems to work well in most instances, but fails horribly in the exact purpose I bought it for. I might have to look into alternative flashcards if I can't come up with a solution, which at this point seems unlikely. So then, back to my original question I wanted answered for this video review. Does it suck?
Yes.